AI text is, well, it's absolutely everywhere these days, isn't it? You see it drafting emails, writing website copy, just popping up all over.
It really is. And, that kind of leads to a really fascinating question.
Which is,
And we actually tell the difference, not just AI versus human, but can we tell different AI models apart just by, well, reading what they write?
Okay. So we're going deeper than just, is this bot written?
Mm-hmm.
You're asking if, say, ChatGPT has a different tell than Claude or Gemini.
Exactly. That's the core idea behind the research we're diving into today. It's exploring whether these big, large language models, LLMs, leave behind their own unique fingerprints.
Right, like maybe how different artists have a style. This paper we looked at, Idiosyncrasies in Large Language Models, is basically asking if LLMs have stylistic tells.
Precisely. So our mission for you today is to unpack this research.
Yeah.
We want to figure out if these model fingerprints are real, what they actually look like, and importantly, why you, as someone trying to stay informed, should care about this stuff.
Okay, let's dive in. So the researchers, they kick things off pretty directly, right? They basically asked, can we train a program, a classifier, to figure out which specific AI wrote a given piece of text?
Yep, that was the starting point. And honestly, the results were pretty striking.
How striking?
Well, they tested it on text from 5 big names: ChatGPT, Claude, Grok, Gemini, and DeepSeek. And their classifier, it nailed it 97.1% of the time on new text it hadn't seen before.
Wait, 97%? That's huge.
Yeah.
I mean, just guessing between 5 options, you'd be right only, 20% of the time?
Exactly. So 97% accuracy shows there are really clear, identifiable differences in how these models speak, you could say.
That's wild. Did they look within model families too, like different versions of the same model?
They did, yeah. They look at the Q2.5 family, specifically at different sizes of that model.
Mm-hmm.
Even there, distinguishing between them, they hit almost 60% accuracy.
Okay, so nearly 60% just for telling different sizes of the same model apart. That's still way better than guessing.
Definitely. It really underlines that even closely related models have their own subtle sort of textural differences.
So the quick version for everyone listening is, yes, different AIs seem to have their own distinct voices, their own styles. It's not just random word soup.
Right. But here's where it gets, I think, even more interesting. They didn't just test raw output. They tried to make it harder.
How so?
They prompted the model specifically to control things. Like they asked for responses of a certain length, or they explicitly told the models not to use formatting like bolding or lists.
Okay, so it's trying to strip away the obvious stylistic stuff, make them all sound plain and similar?
That was the idea.
Yeah.
You'd think, that would make them harder to tell apart.
Yeah, you'd expect the accuracy to plummet.
It barely budged. Even with length controls, accuracy was still over 90%. Same for the format controls, still really high.
Wow, so even when you try to force them into a similar box, their underlying differences still shine through?
It really seems that way. It suggests these idiosyncrasies aren't just superficial. They're like baked into how the models work fundamentally.
So even a short, plain answer might still betray whether it came from Model A or Model B.
Looks like it. And get this. They even found that just the first few words could be a clue.
Really? Just the opening words?
Yeah, in some tests, just looking at the very beginning of the text gave them around 50% accuracy. That points to some really ingrained habits in how they start responding.
Okay, but hang on. They also did another test, right? Looking at the same model, but using different ways to generate the text, different sampling strategies.
Right. So essentially, changing the randomness factor in how the AI picks the next word.
And what happened then? Could they still tell the outputs apart easily?
See, that's where the accuracy dropped way down. It was only slightly better than just random guessing.
Okay, so that's interesting. The model's overall voice is pretty consistent, but the sort of random micro variations within that voice aren't a strong fingerprint.
Exactly. The core style is the key, not the minor, unpredictable word choices.
Makes sense. So what is the classifier actually picking up on then? Is it specific word choices? Like, does ChatGPT just really like certain words?
That seems to be a huge part of it, yeah. They did this clever experiment where they shuffled the text.
Shuffled, like scrambled the word order.
Totally scrambled. They took the text, stripped out punctuation and formatting, and just randomized the word sequence.
Okay, and could the classifier still work?
Amazingly, yes. Even with the meaning gone and the order jumbled, accuracy was still around 88, 89%.
Wow, so that really points to the vocabulary itself, the distribution of words as being super important.
Absolutely. It's about which words they tend to use, how often. They even look at super common words, the in and to, basic stuff.
And they found differences even there.
Yep. Noticeable differences in frequency. Claude, for instance, apparently uses those common function words a bit less often than some of the others.
That's kind of counterintuitive. You'd think the absolute basics of language would be consistent.
Right. But nope, even those tiny variations add up to a signal. And they went further, looking for characteristic phrases using TF-IDF.
TF-IDF, that's the thing that finds words that are unusually common in one text compared to others, like a signature word.
Exactly that. It helps find the words or short phrases a model overuses compared to general language.
And did they find good examples? Like, what are some ChatGPT-isms?
Oh, definitely. ChatGPT apparently leans on phrases like such as, certainly, and overall.
Okay, I can kind of picture that.
Whereas Claude was more likely to use things like here, according to, or based on. The paper has examples and you can really see it. ChatGPT might start, certainly, here are, while Claude might go with, based on the information.
That makes it really concrete. It's like they have little verbal ticks. You mentioned something about first words, too.
Yeah, they mapped out the probability of different models starting with certain words.
And they differed.
Significantly. Like the chance of ChatGPT starting with sure versus Claude starting with based, it's quite different. Which helps explain why even that first word gives a hint.
So it's word choice, common words, characteristic phrases, even the very first word. What about formatting? Does that play a role? Like bolding, lists, that kind of thing?
It absolutely does. Turns out their use of markdown on, bold, italics, headers, bullets, code blocks, that's another part of the signature.
Seriously, how they use bold text can help tell them apart.
Well, yeah. They did an experiment where they removed all the actual words, leaving only the markdown formatting cues.
Just the formatting. What happened?
For the chat APIs and the instruct models, the ones designed to be more interactive, the classifier could still identify the source with pretty high accuracy, like 73% to 77%.
Huh. But not for the simpler base models.
Right, for those it was closer to chance. It seems the models built for conversation develop more distinct formatting habits.
Okay, so what kind of habits?
They found patterns. Like, Claude tends to use less bold text and fewer headers than ChatGPT. And even in lists, they might differ. Maybe ChatGPT bolds the item while Claude just uses a simple bullet. These little visual style choices add up.
Got it. So word choice, phrasing, formatting, these are all parts of the fingerprint. But the paper mentioned semantic fingerprints too. What's that about? Does the meaning itself have a style?
This is where it gets really deep. They wanted to see if the underlying meaning or structure, separate from the exact words, also carried a signal.
How could they test that?
By changing the words but keeping the meaning. They tried paraphrasing the AI text using another LLM, translating it to Chinese and back, and even summarizing it.
Okay, so messing with the surface language quite a bit. Could they still tell the original source?
Yeah, remarkably well, actually. After paraphrasing and translation, accuracy was still up around 91, 92%.
Wow. So it's not just the words, it's something about how they structure the information, the flow of meaning?
That's the strong implication. It suggests the way they organize thoughts, the semantic structure, is also distinct.
That feels like a much deeper level of difference than just vocabulary.
It really is. And even after summarizing, which obviously condenses things a lot, accuracy was still significantly above chance, around 57, 58%.
So even the gist, the summarized core, retains some flavor of the original model.
It seems so, which suggests these differences permeate down to a pretty fundamental level of how they process and present information.
Did they try to, describe these deeper differences?
They did something clever. They used another LLM as a kind of judge to give open-ended descriptions. They fed it text from different models and asked it to compare tone, structure, formatting, content.
Like getting an AI's opinion on another AI style. What did the judge say?
The descriptions were really telling. For instance, it often described ChatGPT as detailed, structured, using lots of formatting.
Okay. And Claude?
Claude was frequently flagged as more concise, straightforward, with minimal formatting. Quite a contrast.
Interesting. Any notes on the others?
Yeah, Grok was often seen as having rich language, being quite comprehensive. Gemini was noted for being concise and having very direct openings.
It really sounds like they have developing personalities almost reflected in their output. This must have some pretty big implications, right, for how we use and build AI.
Absolutely. A major one the paper highlights is about training new models on synthetic data generated by other AIs.
Ah, right. If you train your new AI on ChatGPT text.
it might inadvertently pick up ChatGPT's idiosyncrasies. They actually showed this happens.
So the voice gets inherited.
It seems so. They did experiments where fine-tuning a model on ChatGPT data made it harder to tell apart from ChatGPT. But then, if you trained another model on that model's output, the distinctiveness could reappear quite strongly. The style propagates.
That's a serious thing to consider for AI development, avoiding these unintentional stylistic copies. What else did they look at?
They also use this whole framework to try and gauge how similar different models are to each other, using a technique called leave one out. Train the classifier on all models except one, then see which model the excluded one's text gets mistaken for most often. It's like asking, who does this one sound most like?
Clever. Did any interesting pairings pop up?
Yeah, some intriguing patterns. They found text from Claude, Grok, and Gemini was quite often misclassified as being from ChatGPT.
Huh. So those three sometimes sound like ChatGPT to the classifier.
Seems that way. And conversely, text from some other models, like Phi-4, was often mistaken for ChatGPT or DeepSeek. It hints at potential underlying similarities, maybe shared training data influences, or just convergent evolution in styles.
Fascinating. It's like mapping out a hidden family tree of AI writing styles.
Yeah, it opens up a lot of questions. So bringing it all together, the big takeaway is that these LLMs definitely have unique, identifiable voices.
And it's not just superficial. It's word choice, yes, but also formatting, structure, even down to the semantic level, the way they seem to organize meaning.
Exactly. And for you listening, knowing this exists can be really useful. Whether you're just curious about the different tools or trying to figure out where some piece of online text might have come from, understanding these digital fingerprints adds another layer to your understanding.
It really does. Which leads to, I guess, a final thought to leave everyone with.
Yeah.
As this AI-generated content becomes even more woven into everything we read and interact with, what does it mean that we can potentially identify the specific AI source?
Good question.
What are the implications, maybe the challenges, or even the opportunities that arise from these AI fingerprints becoming more detectable? Think about content creation, fake news, information literacy. Even just, what does authorship mean when an AI has such a distinct, identifiable style?
That's definitely something to chew on. How does this change things as these tools become more and more capable? A lot to think about there.